In the previous session, we went over a general idea of the periodic table, how periodic table is a combination of vertical columns called groups and horizontal rows called periods, and how there is a number on top of each group, and we will be using in this class and also maybe a future chemistry classes the Roman numeral with the letter A or B, or it could even be an Arabic number as long as it has a letter A or B after it. So please only focus on those numbers. We also talked about how the period numbers sometimes are not given, the row numbers, and if not, you can always write them down yourselves. But let's focus on a categorization of these elements, more in-depth classification of these elements. Okay, so as we said, there will be two uppercase letters on top of each group that you will be focusing on, letter A and letter B. In other words, elements can be divided either into the A category if the group has a letter A associated with it, or the B category if the group has the letter B associated with it. Now, within the A category of elements, there are several subgroups, special names for some of those families. The A category of elements are collectively known as the representative elements or the main group elements. All the elements whose group number has a letter A associated with it are either called representative elements or main group elements. Within the representative or the main group elements, then there are some families that have special names. Please pay very close attention to these. Group 1A, excluding hydrogen though, all the elements from lithium down to francium, so lithium, sodium, potassium, rubidium, cesium, francium, except for hydrogen, all group 1A elements are called alkali metals. All group 2A elements are called collectively alkaline earth metal family. If you skip over to the other end of the periodic table, group 7A are collectively known as halogens, and group 8A are collectively known as noble gases, sometimes also called inert gases. So just to state the same thing again, all the elements in the A categories are called representative elements or main group elements. Those elements that are in group 1A, excluding hydrogen though, excluding hydrogen, are called alkali metals. All the elements in group 2A are called alkaline earth metals. Group 7A is collectively known as the halogen family, and group 8A collectively is known as the noble gas family or the inert gas family. It may be a good idea to pause the recording at this stage and maybe color code these elements that we've just talked about. Going over to the group, the B category elements, they can fall under one of two different classifications, so to speak. The B category of elements could either be transition elements or they can be the inner transition elements. The transition elements are the B category elements that are in the main body of the periodic table. So if you look at the periodic table and focus on the group numbers, starting with scandium Sc Z value 21, on the other end to zinc Z value 30, those columns of elements in the main body of the periodic table are collectively known as transition elements or transition metals. The two rows at the bottom that are taken out from the main body of the periodic table and placed at the bottom are collectively known as the inner transition elements. So we've got the cerium family starting with Z58 through 71, and then we've got the lanthanum family starting with Z90 to Z103. Those are collectively called inner transition elements or inner transition metals, or sometimes some books also refer to them as the rare earth metals. So if you look at a periodic table to highlight what we have just discussed, we've got collectively all the A category elements are collectively known as the representative elements or the main group elements. Within the main group elements, within the representative elements, excluding hydrogen, we've got the alkali metal family, the alkaline earth metal family, the halogen family, and the inert gas family, also known as the noble gas family. Within the B group of metals, so once again, focus on the letter B. Within those, the elements that are in the main body of the periodic table are called transition elements, and the two rows at the bottom, which do fit in the main body but we have pulled them out and placed them at the bottom, are called the inner transition elements or the rare earth elements or rare earth metals, whatever terminology you want to use them. Okay, so for example, if I asked you to classify an element such as neon, it would be in the noble gas family. Calcium is in the alkaline earth metal family. How about phosphorus? Phosphorus doesn't have a special name, or that family doesn't have a special name, so it can just be called a representative element or a main group element. How about Z equal to 63, EU, europium? That's an inner transition element or a rare earth element. How about palladium Z46? That's a transition element or a transition metal. How about gold, AU? That's also a transition element or a transition metal. Lithium, Li, is an alkali metal. Oxygen is a representative element or a main group element, so on and so forth. So elements based upon their position can be classified into one of these different classifications. Now, based upon, again, where the place is, a position of an element can also be classified as a metal or a non-metal. So a very quick review of what is a metal or what is a non-metal, or what are the observable properties that characterize a metal or a non-metal. Metals are generally very shiny and have a very lustrous surface. They are very malleable and ductile, meaning that you can change their shape without them breaking apart. They are very malleable, and most metals are good conductors of heat or electricity. Non-metals or most metals are also solids at room temperature. Of course, there is an exception, mercury is an exception, but most metals are solids at room temperature. Non-metals, on the other hand, do not have a shiny or lustrous surface. They are actually quite brittle and they have dull exteriors. They are not malleable. You can't bend or pull a non-metal into a wire. You can't do that. It would fall apart, crumble in your hands. So they are also not conducting of heat or electricity. They actually, most of them serve as good insulators. They are not good conductors at all. And most non-metals are gases at room temperature, but there are quite a few that are solids at room temperature as well. There is one non-metallic element, though, bromine to be specific, that is actually a liquid at room temperature. So there are some very characteristic differences in the properties of metals versus non-metals. And of course, then there is a third category of elements that can behave as metals and non-metals, and those are called metalloids or semi-metals. So when you look at the periodic table, I hope you can identify a bold line that goes through your periodic table, goes zigzags through your periodic table. So let me find that. If you look at your periodic table, and if your periodic table doesn't have one, you can go ahead and draw it, but it starts on this corner of the periodic table and it kind of zigzags in a step form across the periodic table. That bold line separates the metals from the non-metals. What I would also like for you to do at this point is extend this bold line from that corner, the top corner of the periodic table, all the way across the periodic table, such that it separates hydrogen from lithium in group 1A, or the alkali metal family. So all the elements that are on the right hand side of the of that separating line are non-metallic elements, whereas all the elements that are on the left hand side of that line are metallic elements. They are metals. What makes an element a metal or a non-metal actually is deeper than just the physical properties that we listed. What makes a non-metal or a metal is has to do more with the chemical properties that we'll discuss later on. So we've got non-metals on the right hand side of the bold line and metals on the left hand side of the bold line, but right along the bold line are some metalloids. Metalloids are also called semi-metals. So please make a note of these. So boron, for example, and then we have below, after boron, we have silicon and germanium. After silicon and germanium, we have As and Sb, and then we have Te, and some periodic tables, depending on which one you're using, may or may not show this one, but that's a semi-metal or a metalloid as well. Other than these elements, metals are either non-metallic or metallic in nature.